Thanks for being here. Iris Barratt, writer, poet, entertainer. You could probably put some other things on there too, but I like those. How does honor and tribalism mix?
Oh, that's a really great question. You know, we all want a sense of connection, and we want a sense of connection that is genuine. And what happens is that when we learn to honor ourselves, we learn to honor other people. And when we learn to honor other people, we learn to honor ourselves. And for me, honestly, it's kind of a simple, I love these event programs that I've created because it starts with a positive sense of play. Many people do that with different kinds of sports, is one good example. When you start with a positive form of play, it leads to friendship. And when you have play and friendship, it leads to trust. And when you have play and friendship and trust, that eventually leads to peace and harmony and a sense of tribe and connection. And of course, we have a negative sense of tribe and we have a positive sense of tribe. So I think those are important things to look at. And those are things that I certainly look at as I'm sort of an inherent peacemaker at heart.
What's the best way, or what are some of the ways to keep the balance of tribalism to where you get the good parts and not the bad parts?
Well, I think if we accentuate the good parts, it can also lead to a sense of protection and connection. We want to protect our family. We want to protect our tribe and serve and protect, just like the policemen do. Serve and protect is a beautiful part of tribalism. It absolutely is. And yet, if it's only sort of a military or a militant sense of protection or a militant sense of tribalism, I think that can be really destructive. And I did a podcast and I talked a lot about how January 6th affected me personally. And honestly, when I saw those guys, shoulder to shoulder in their military gear, walking up there to take over the Capitol, and I watched the violence that happened, what I realized in my heart of hearts is that was a negative sense of tribalism. And brotherhood's a beautiful thing, protection's a beautiful thing, but militant tribalism can be a very negative and destructive thing. And I really felt like tribalism is a wonderful thing, but January 6th showed a misdirected attempt to try to create a sense of brotherhood or tribalism in a negative way. And of course, tribalism affects everyone to some degree, women, children, and everyone. You have a comment about that?
No, I think tribalism, just another way to say it, is the us and them divide. So it's, if you have too much of the us and them, then that's going to be bad. You need a certain amount of it to survive, maybe. And when I hear tribalism, I think more of a more Stone Age time, but the idea is still the same. I mean, it's still the us and them setup of human society. And how do you get it to be big enough to where it includes everyone? And is that possible in the human mind? Can you hold together the idea of all of us, humanity? Do you want to be included with all of humanity, and them, someone else? Like, certainly if there was some sort of alien attack, and it would be easy to say, well, this is human, this is not human. So then you have your us and them there. But
yes,
just in living regularly, I feel like there's probably a reasonable limit to where people that are as evolved as us can't see beyond a group of, I don't, maybe back in times before agreed upon laws so much, it was a smaller group, like maybe 20 to 100, or 100's probably pushing it. And then now you could have countries because you haven't agreed upon morality or law. And then I think that's when countries get into trouble, is when there isn't a clear law that everyone accepts or morality that everyone wants to take part in.
I agree with that. Absolutely, I do.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's that us versus them mentality. And, we see it everywhere. We see it in the workplace, we see it in families, we see it in communities with neighbors. And, everyone wants to protect their own. And in the same breath, everyone wants to reach out and feel a part of. There's a sense of belonging. And it can be extreme. I think the sense of belonging shows its extreme face in certain religious factions, certainly in war and territorialism, um, politics. There are certain ways that people want to belong, and it becomes more misdirected rather than unifying. And so I think that to find a sense of unity and tribe within your family, your workplace, your community is such a wonderful and important thing when it is especially based on what you and I might consider humanitarian ideals. Love, trust, truth, all of those things. And I see a lot of positive play, like sports, for example. Yeah, it's great to be a part of the team. It's great to feel like, this is my team, this is our tribe. And a certain amount of healthy competition can be okay. It's when it, gets crazy at the end, when your team doesn't win and you're destroying people's cars and you're going berserk. So I think that it's a really important topic to look at. And my answer, my sense of it is we need positive forms of play. Underlying it all, we feel separate. We feel separate, we feel less than, which makes us want to overpower. And when we learn to honor other people, we learn to honor ourselves. And it's absolutely true. And with my honoring events, I have several different variations. We learn to honor each other in a positive form of play, like my honoring storytelling. I sometimes call it honoring improv. It's a ton of fun. And, people, again, positive play, it learns to friendship, which leads to trust. Got to have friendship before you can have trust. And when you have trust, you need that in order to have peace and harmony. And I see this with my programs in the workplace. People find something they appreciate about one of their coworkers that they've always had a bad connection with, and it softens family members, neighbors, community members. I don't know. I cannot tell you how much honoring other people has taught me to honor myself and how it's made a huge impact. It's enhanced and enriched my life beyond measure and the life of other people too.
When you say honor, what do you mean by that?
Well, for example, I have these honoring awards that I send. I call them Evolving Genius Awards. And I advocate sending them anonymously. I've done this since I was a young adult, and I'm in my 70s now for a long time. And so, to be able to send someone an award, I've got a couple examples here if you want to hear one. To send it anonymously is beautiful because then everybody has to wonder, who sent me a Childlike Wonder Award? Who sent me a Loving Kindness Award? Who honored me anonymously as a caregiver? And it's so wonderful because you have to think about all the wonderful people in your life and who might have been so kind. And yes, the honoring has an impact, and so does the secret, so does the mystery. Everybody loves getting a mysterious, wonderful, uplifting thing in the mail, and children of all ages really do.
With your writing, do you also do poetry, or is poetry a normal thing that you're doing?
It's part of what I do. I have a poem that calls Honoring Builds a Circle of Nobility. And it's very popular. People love it. It goes in the mail with every one of my honoring awards that I send. I have an Etsy shop that's called Evolving Genius Awards. And I have something like 22 or more honoring awards, a similar amount of Sassy Wake Up Call awards, which are a great way to confront gossip mongers and mindless moochers anonymously. And they're kind of fun. They're poetic, which gives them a softer place to land. Um, so anyway, I love honoring people. My poem, Honoring Builds a Circle of Nobility, is very popular. I have another one called Our Evolving Shadow Mirror, which goes out with my sassy wake up calls. And then I also have a comedy show where I do the light and the dark together, pick people out of the audience and give them honoring awards. And I intuitively suggest people who might want, say, for example, a mindless moocher award for someone they know. I don't tag people directly, but it's a lot of fun.
When you're writing, do you set time aside to write those things, or do you write it when it occurs?
Both. Absolutely.
When
And I set time aside also to edit. I think every good writer knows that, edit, re-edit, that's part of the process. And whether that's me creating one of my honoring event programs or one of my awards or some of my poetry. Yeah. And I just want to mention, in terms of tribe and tribalism, as a peacemaker, I wanted to find a way to connect, especially after January 6th, to connect the positive aspects of military with peacemaking. And I wrote one that actually got published a lot for Veterans Day. And it's called We Are Fallen Heroes. And it talks about how people like my husband, who was a volunteer police reserve officer for most of his adult life, after they die, these people who have been in the military, how they become peacemakers and how their perception changes, and how it just points out the negative aspect of militarization and negative tribalism, and how it can also lead to awareness of serving and protecting and peacemaking. And if you'd like to have that poem sometime, I'd be happy to share it with you.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the cult peacemaker?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
The pistol, the revolver that cult made, called the Peacemaker. Speaking of peacemaking through the military.
Yeah, I think it's an incredible oxymoron. Yes, unless you come across somebody who is killing other people, and then of course it's the right thing to do is to kill someone else so they don't harm other people as a peacemaker. That's one thing. However, I think there's a lot of paranoia in the world that leads to deaths that don't need to happen. I think we watch so much TV. There's so much violence on TV. We grow up with violence. Power over. Our ego wants to be more powerful. Our ego wants to be more special. And, unfortunately, it runs away with a lot of people. And it's like even some of the video games that are so violent. I have an issue with that because the music is hypnotic. TV is hypnotic. And I think a lot of the reason we have so much violence in our world is because of hypnotic negative television. That's how I feel about it, honestly.
Yeah, I don't think it helps. I mean,
No,
probably
it sure
the source of violence is probably just life in general, like people in general. To survive, there's an inherent violence in existence for whatever reason. But it does seem like if you didn't have a military, or even to put it more simply, if you didn't have a way to protect yourself or protect your society, your tribe, your country, however far out you want to go, that you are likely to become the victim of violence instead of using violence to
protect.
Violence or the threat of violence, to protect you.
Yes, exactly. And my point is that when we don't have trust, that's when we feel like we have to protect ourselves. And sometimes it's absolutely true and viable, and other times it's not. People don't get to know each other and have the kinds of deep friendships and the kinds of trust that I think people used to have. In our fast-paced world, in our time is money, materialistic world, I just think that friendship and peacemaking really go together. Just like, a gun and a certain amount of military is important in terms of service and protection. So again, there's a balance in there somewhere. I'm not, yes, I'm more extreme as a peacemaker because I believe that with enough friendship and enough trust, so much more of that is absolutely unnecessary. And, I don't talk about it much, but in my background as a clinical hypnotherapist, I really feel strongly that television is hypnotic. It's like you get sucked into the story. It's not real, but boy, the drama takes you over. And I really think that it affects our emotional bodies in a negative way. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I think TV, too much of that hypnotic TV drama is what makes a lot of susceptible people more susceptible to violence. At least I question that.
Yeah, it's an easier way to program the human. I mean, before it's not as much information, and now it's just more and more information from all kinds of things. So that's why you get programmed easier. I like Alec Baldwin's explanation of TV when somebody said TV rots your brain, and he says, no, it just softens it. So it's like high fructose corn syrup, like regular sugar. You could get, honey or whatever sugar in nature, and then you have that certain amount that we're designed for, I guess. And then
Yes.
you concentrate it more and it becomes something worse or
Yes.
detrimental.
That's a good analogy.
It's interesting with trust because I don't know if I was looking up the definition of trust just because I don't recall ever having looked it up. I guess having confidence in. I mean, you can trust people and it could be in a negative way too. Like I trust that bad person's going to do a bad thing because that's what bad people do, bad things. So and you got that kind of trust. And then you got the trust of, I know, I think this person is going to do the right thing. So.
Well, I think trust is built. I think it is built. Absolutely. It reminds me of the saying, "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." I feel the same way about trust. 'Tis better to have trusted and been betrayed than never to have trusted at all. And I believe that trust is built. I don't think that it's necessarily as innate as we would like it to be. Maybe it's innate, maybe it's not. Just like violence, maybe it is, maybe it's not. However, I really think that it is built, and I think it's built through connection that's genuine, through friendship, and again, oftentimes through positive forms of play or really honoring and appreciating people. When we look for the good in other people, we find it. And when we honor other people, we learn to honor ourselves. And that's where the magic happens, in my view. There's so much negativity in the world that contributes to, all different kinds of bullying and negative behavior. One of the things that I have written is a poem that's called Shame on You. And it has been translated into a ton of languages internationally, because what it does is it confronts verbal abuse and bullying. And it's been translated into a lot of languages. Yes, it's a great poem. However, the sad part is it's so prevalent because bullying and verbal abuse are so prevalent throughout all cultures, all ages, all socioeconomic strata. And so I send that poem anonymously. People can pay me a few bucks on my Etsy shop. I absolutely mail it anonymously. And it clearly says it's sent anonymously as a serious wake-up call. And it transforms lives because, again, people don't know who sent it. So it's powerful. The mystery of anonymous giving, whether that's honoring or wake-up calls, is powerful. And we have way too much verbal abuse and bullying. And that really contributes, I think, to more bad behavior.
Yeah, I grew up in the time of the sticks and stones thing, but I understand the idea of words being actionable, or some words being directly actionable, depending on where you are when you hear it or it's said to you. But Yeah, bullying's not good, but
They're triggers. Words can be
there,
triggers for sure.
there needs to be a certain amount of bullying, I think, to prepare the person for life.
I don't know that it's necessarily bullying, but yeah, we need to learn how to, deal with any kind of aggression and oppression and exploitation. Those things are real in our world. And I think you're right. I grew up with sticks and stones too. And, it's all about learning how to be the bigger person and how to breathe your way, through it. And the good news is those negative behaviors teach us what's most important to us. I grew up with a certain amount of verbal abuse. I wrote that poem and it's powerful. And that's one of the reasons I think I became a clinical hypnotherapist, because I know that words and positive visualization can affect us in positive ways. If we have no idea what we want or where we're going, how possible is it for us to get there? And words are triggers, whether that's, something really negative or something really positive. And yeah, we have to learn how to deal with those things, how to look at what our values are, and how I don't want to be a verbal abuser. I want to be someone who uplifts and inspires other people.
Yeah. It's sometimes you hear it's easier to be mean than it is to be nice. I'm not sure if that's the case. I think it's probably even. It's easier. I mean, it's the same to be nice or mean. It's just we're conditioned to the mean side, it seems. What do you think that the reason, or how can people find their purpose?
That's a pretty deep question.
Yeah.
How can they find their purpose? I believe it's through service. And I think that, we all need to learn to get outside of ourselves. We take everything so dang personally. And I think we need to sort of move more from the personal, it's all about me and my life and my way, to more of the universal, having a broader sense of humanity. And I think that comes through service. And I don't care if that's military service. I don't care if that's, being a caregiver, caring for family, being a parent, caring for your family. I think we're all here to find our gift and to be of service. And I think that sometimes we might know what our ideal form of service is. Start somewhere, mow the neighbor's lawn, clean up the neighbor's dog poop in your yard, whatever. Start somewhere. I think that service is such a beautiful part of awakening that people experience. It feels good to give to other people. It feels good to give of yourself. It feels good to let go of some of your selfishness. It feels good to, know that if someone's being a bully, that, you can have maybe even a touch of compassion over time for that person. You didn't walk in their shoes, but you certainly don't want to go there. It makes it clearer to you, though, that you want to be kinder with your words when it comes to other people. Does that make sense to you?
It does. I like the service thing too. If you don't
Oh,
know what to
yes.
do, then do something for someone else. That's a kind of oversimplification, because you want to do something that is positive for someone else, not just, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to burn that person's house down. I
Well,
did that
yeah,
for them.
it's not really a
So
form of service, but
yeah, you have to, you have to count on the person having some sort of understanding of right and wrong. How do you think that understanding is developed in people?
I think it starts in the family, honestly. I think parents have a responsibility to help their children learn about service and about, all of the qualities that service can bring. When we're of service, I mean, it brings loyalty, it brings dedication. And we if kids don't ever learn how to be of service and give to other people, we don't have anything to encourage them for. But when they're out there and they do something nice for one of their neighbors, one of their friends, then we can give them the encouragement and we can just rub it in and tell them, oh, what a wonderful thing. Didn't that make you feel great? I really do believe it starts in the family. And I know a lot of parents think the schools should teach ethics and, all of that stuff to children. And the schools do the best they can, I think. but I really believe that it should begin at home. And whether you do something nice for a brother or sister, a neighbor, and when kids naturally do something good, make sure you make a big deal out of it, And I think also it's important to balance privileges with responsibility. I'm really big about that. And I'm a mean mama, but seriously, it's like, privileges are to be earned. So many kids think they're entitled to every privilege every kid in the universe has. And a lot of parents, they don't get the importance of, yeah, you earn your privileges. You earn the right to drive by taking a test, learning how, and I feel the same way about gun ownership. I feel like, yeah, you need to go through some kind of hunter training course or something. You need to earn the right. You need to earn the privilege. I think, yes, we have certain inalienable rights, but we have, I think, rights which need to be earned, privileges that need to be earned. And I think that starts in the family.
Yeah, definitely starts at home. The idea being that that's who has the most influence on you. And then I think that nowadays, in a lot of situations, the home doesn't have the greatest influence because it's either people aren't there to teach you or you're substituted into TV or video games, other things where you're spending all of your time doing it, and that's what's programming you. And then there was, back in the day, went to a seminar called Bulletproof Mind by, I think the guy was Lieutenant Colonel Grossman, retired Army guy. And he had a section that talked about violent video games and how they've done tests on them and done brain scans while people were playing them and thinking about playing them and when they hadn't played them. And it showed a type of intoxication. It was close to how when somebody's intoxicated, how their brain looks. And it's a thing that you can probably have that in a bunch of things. Like if you were a woodworker and you're just doing woodworking all the time, you're activating that part of your brain, and it might be a little more difficult to talk to a regular person because you're so locked into woodworking. But if you're into violent video games, then that's shaping, especially when you're younger, before the age of 10, probably, if you go with that psychology belief that what you are is where you were when you were 10, that all your morals and values are set by then, and it takes something huge to change them.
I agree. And the other thing I would add to that real briefly, if you don't mind, is, we all have a certain amount of hero worship. We all want to be a hero, and what kind of hero do you want to be? You want to be, a military hero, somebody with big guns and, all the heroes on TV. Well, some of the good guys, yeah, some of them use guns, some of them don't. But I think that we need to look at how can we help our children feel like a hero, and it starts with simple things. Like I said, doing something good in the neighborhood. Anyway, and I totally understand that psychology. That makes absolute sense to me as a clinical hypnotherapist. And, TV and violence with video games, I think, is hugely impacting our society, which, as the rates of crime continue to go up, as we don't trust each other, as we don't really work at authentic friendships, all that stuff really matters to me. And I really appreciate you bringing that up.
What do you think the reason that we are alive is?
I believe that we are here to evolve. And that to me means to find your gifts, find a need and fill it, be of service to each other. It's all about love. Giving and receiving love is, like, I guess, the most fundamental thing, I would say. And of course, there are many aspects to giving and receiving love, gratitude, sharing gratitude with people, and encouraging, appreciating, and supporting other people are what my awards and my honoring events are all about. And positive forms of play. And everybody wants a certain amount of appreciation, encouragement, support. That's how we thrive. I think we need to start there. We don't all start out as these, beautiful, enlightened spiritual beings that are all about, love and joy and grace and all the good stuff. We start out with, looking at the good and looking at the bad and looking at the reality of our lives and, doing our best to find a way where we can feel proud of ourselves and be a hero of our own life in whatever that means to us. I mean, what does it mean to you to be a hero? I'm curious. Have you thought about that or not?
I don't think I have. I don't think I have the need to be a hero. When I was a trooper, there was a coworker that was killed, and at his funeral, one of his friends talked about not being a hero but being a champion.
Nice.
And champion is, I think you can take it the wrong way, but I think champion to me is that you have a purpose and that you're working towards something, that it's in service towards something. You're the champion of this cause, not really a champion like I'm the greatest,
Right.
I've won this sporting event, but a champion of someone's champion, whether it's society's champion of this thing or whatever. And
See, I agree. And I think that's the evolved aspect of it. And I think when kids are young, though, they want to be a superhero. And then hopefully we evolve to the point where we find a form of service that we resonate with and we can become a champion, whoever that's for, our family, our pets, whatever. So I think that's really a wonderful thing to share. Thank you for that.
That's a good point. The superhero is probably the young version of developing service, because if you're a hero in that sense, a hero for what? Like,
Exactly.
what are you doing? So maybe that's helping kids at, two different ways of saying, we want you to do some sort of service, but you also have to find a purpose. Like, what is it that you feel the calling to do? Is it animal rights? Is it defending the country? Is it putting out fires? What's it going
And
to
I
be?
love those vocational questionnaires that they give you in even junior high or high school, where you really get to look at, what do you love? And wow, how that can be connected with a certain vocation. I think those are great. The Myers-Briggs, you might be familiar with that. That's a real common way for people to sort of get to know a little bit about their inherent tendencies. Are you an extrovert or an introvert? Well, both have their skill sets. And so, yeah, I think all that really matters. And I think everyone should have the opportunity to do a good vocational assessment. And the more, like they say, the unexamined life is not worth living. And of course, the more we learn to have a strong foundation of values and service within ourselves, that's when the outer world looks so different. It all starts in here. It all comes back to ourselves, right? Our own perceptions.
What do you think happens after we're not here anymore?
I would love to share. So I've always been a ridiculously intuitive person, and I love reading how other psychic people process information. And James Van Praagh, who's very popular, he was once asked, asking your people on the other side, what do they think is the highest realm that we get to? Like, what does it look like when we really ascend to the greatest place that we're capable of? And what supposedly his guides or ancestors or the people on the other side said is, we reflect the glory of divine harmonic essence. And I thought that was really interesting. It is about harmony. We are all here I love that with the Mayans, the ancient Mayans talked about, and they're the sacred timekeepers, about how it's about finding sacred harmony within yourself and within your world. And I believe that harmony is sacred. And so to me, it's all about peace and harmony. It just really is. That's how we thrive together. We're here to thrive together.
So it's the balance of good and evil.
I think it's beyond the balance of good and evil. I think it's I think it's recognizing that we all have a spark of, whether you want to call that divinity. I really believe that the good is always stronger than the negative. I believe that we come in, and that's why we evolve, is to take those shadows, those challenges, and know that that's fuel for the fire to grow up and become who we're really meant to be, through service, through good intentions, through random acts of kindness. I am the eternal optimist, and that's why it's so difficult for me to see how, in this age where people have so many distractions and there's so much technical stuff, people text each other rather than actually hearing your voice and getting the tone of your voice. It's like encouraging someone by text is not the same as even by voicemail. Instead of texting people a lot, I love to give a voicemail so that they can hear how I feel. So yeah, I am an optimist. Yes, we live in a world of duality and polarity. I get that. And yet I believe that the human spirit is absolutely amazing. And there are amazing examples pretty much everywhere if you look for them.
You should look into the voice text instead of the voicemail. Leaving a voicemail nowadays is crazy.
Well, and on your phone, there's usually a little record icon where you can just, and people love that. And they're like, oh, I got your message. And when I'm being encouraging or kind or excited for someone's success, I want them to hear my voice, not just to get an emoji and a text message. It really matters to me. It feels more authentically me to send a voice message than it does a text message.
Yeah, I think it's the audience too, but certainly sometimes when people call me, it's like transported back to the 80s and we're talking on the phone about stuff. It's like we could do this on a text, but yeah, there is a connection through the voice. So what comes next after this, I mean, I guess you said it through the explanation of someone else. Is that what you think it is too? That it's the balance, a harmonic balance of glory and to the ethereal? I don't know. I can't remember the exact thing you said.
Reflect the glory of divine harmonic essence.
Okay.
So
what does glory mean? What does glory mean in that?
Well, the goodness, the highest level, perhaps. A glorious sunset might be an exquisite sunset, for lack of better terms, one that really, transports you to a moment of just really being present and grateful or in awe. The world and nature can be very awe-inspiring for people, and it can awaken a sense of connection. I think the first place that people feel a sense of tribe or connection, if you will, is with nature, whether that's with the water, the trees, the ocean. It's like the saying, we have the ocean in a drop, not just a drop in the ocean. We all reflect the grand oneness of the natural world, just like all of the animals and everything else in our natural world. I think it's sad that we live in so many concrete jungles and so many people never really get a chance to get out and hike in nature and do some deep breathing and look at the glory of, what really has been created. The earth is a beautiful place.
It's an interesting conversation to have, to talk about existence and purpose, because it has a certain presupposition that there is something more to this, to existence, than just what we can see and what we know in our time. And then you do have the people that say, well, I don't think there's anything after this. And I'm glad that I don't go through life like that. If there is nothing after this and it's just a long dreamless sleep, to put it a nice way, but if there is nothing, then I guess I won't care, because I won't be around. I won't have any understanding of what's happening, because there won't be anything happening. But it certainly seems like life would be better from what we know of it now, if you thought there was a reason for it. And at least it would give the ability to have that, to be grateful for things, because otherwise it's just, what am I grateful for? That this just happened this way. It's just chance that all this was formed, that the tree and the earth and everything is just a chance. Or I think you have to accept, whether you do knowingly or not, but somewhere in there, you have to accept that there's something more to be able to be grateful for things. Maybe that's why there's such a blank place in, it seems, in people's existence that don't think that, or fight the idea that there is something more, even though nobody knows for sure and nobody can explain. But
I like the idea that, we take with us into eternity our good deeds and the good that we have given, and, the love that we have given and received. I think that, love is the only thing that lasts. It's the only thing that you get to take with you is really all the good stuff. And, I think it's easy to look at nature and to see how the eternal aspect of life flourishes within nature. Something dies, it provides mulch for new life. There are sacred cycles, and it does include creation and destruction and birth and death. And I think more and more people who are finding a sense of attunement to nature can really sense, and sometimes it's subconscious, but we can sense that there is an eternal aspect to life if we look for it. I remember when I was a kid reading the book called The Web of Life, and it was the basics of ecology, and how beautiful it is that the leaves, when the trees leaves die off and hit the ground, how it provides mulch for new life. And I just think that studying ecology and nature is perhaps one good way. And then, of course, we have a lot of near-death experience people everywhere on TV and otherwise who have had these profound experiences where they have come back and shared what they have seen from the other side, which I think has really helped a lot of people I know who have had a parent or a spouse or a pet die unexpectedly. I think it gives them a lot of comfort to hear about near-death experiences and know that some people are absolutely clear of what happens on the other side, and they no longer have a fear of death. And I think that's a really wonderful thing that's shifting consciousness these days about death and
I don't
eternal
know
life.
if you didn't think there was anything else, if you would live life more recklessly, or if you'd live it more carefully to the point of just not doing anything. I don't know. I guess it goes back and forth with people of
Yes.
that, but it does help to think that there's something else and not to be so worried. Maybe if you think that you're more evil than good, then I would probably be worried about dying. So
Well, and I think the other thing is we never know how much our good expands and spreads. Like I send an honorary caregiver award to someone anonymously. Somebody says, oh, so-and-so, it's really hard for them, but they're an amazing caregiver. It's a hard road. We all know being a caregiver is hard. So I send one of these anonymous awards. People call me crying the most when they get my caregiver award. It's so hard, and I'm not always perfect, but I know it's important. Well, and then after they receive it, they can't wait to anonymously share it with another caregiver because they know how deeply it touched them. And so my honoring awards are great for that because people receive a Childlike Wonder award when they retire. They think it's great. They can't wait to give one to their best friend who's going to retire or a family member. And so, the good carries on, and we never really know those little random acts of kindness, how much those affect other people down the road. And I see it over and over and over again with these anonymous awards that I send to people, and how deeply it touches them, and how they have to look at everyone in their life and wonder who was so wonderful. And they oftentimes call their best friend, their family member, and say, oh, I got this wonderful thing, and I bet it could have been you. And they're like, and sometimes they'll go, well, it wasn't me, but I wish it would have been, or I could have been. So, when you spread the good, it does travel. It does spread. And I think more so than people recognize. And I think when we see it spread in our everyday lives, we can imagine that it spreads into eternity as well.
What's the best way for people to be able to send those awards, like find out what you're doing and contact you?
Yes, thank you. So if you go to Etsy, etsy.com, and then just add shop Evolving Genius Awards, all of my ebooks, all of my event entertainment programs, all of my awards, they are all there. I also have a website called honoringevents.com, and you can go there and find links that take you to my Etsy shop that show you my honoring tributes for milestone events. You know, we have so many milestones that we can honor people for: graduations, retirements, you know, wonderful healing opportunities that people survive. I mean, I think it's really important that we look for opportunities to honor each other and actually do it, because honoring makes everybody look and feel great. And we all know about positive emotions, how they affect us physically, psychologically, and emotionally. And that's my big thing too about, you know, the war and the violence, man. That stuff is not good in your system. It's just not. It's not the same as, you know, love and joy on your physical body. You know, emotions have a big impact on our bodies.
Any thoughts in closing, or any thing you wanted to talk about that we didn't?
Well, I just really want to thank you and honor you for bringing this topic to your people. I think that, you know, we are a country that spends more money on military than anybody else in the world by far. It's an insane amount of money. They cannot account for the money we spend on war. And, you know, this insane desire we have to protect ourselves, you know, does lead to violence and bullying and a lack of trust. And, you know, I do feel strongly about building trust and friendship and having positive forms of play, and knowing that those lead to peace and harmony. I love my honoring event programs. They're for milestone events is one program. I have another one that is called Honoring Improv. It's spontaneous honoring storytelling with wonderful humanitarian prompts. I would like to share my definition of being a visionary. To me, a visionary is one who is inspired and haunted by humanitarian ideals and endeavors. And that would be me.
What's the insane part of wanting to protect yourself?
You know, self-protection, there's a place for it. But again, it's all a matter of degree. And if you're so inward and so self-protective that you don't let other people in, you really miss out so much in life. It's about giving and receiving, not just being a shell. You know, they say no man is meant to be an island, and I believe that. You know, most people, when they get ready to die, what they realize, the most important thing in their life has been their friendships, has been the ability to give and receive love in whatever ways that they have done that. That's what really gives our life meaning, is friendship, is play, is joy, peace and harmony, trust. It's big stuff. It's the most important stuff, I think, for many people.
Yeah, it would be nice if humans could exist without militaries and everybody is friendly and trusting of each other. I don't know how we get to that point. So then I'm left with that thing attributed, the idea attributed to Ben Franklin, but surely been said by other, is that it's the worst way to live, except for every other way that we know. Like, it's how could we live in a society that didn't have borders, that everybody was friends and everyone trusted each other? I don't see it. So and maybe because we have all the militaries, you can't see it, but I would imagine that if we didn't have the military, we just wouldn't be around, because we'd be overrun by whatever was out there that wanted what we had.
Well, I think that can be true. And I think that there are also societies in history that have lived in peace and harmony. And excuse me for pointing it out, but most of those were matriarchal rather than patriarchal. Women oftentimes are more about unity, and men are more about, divide and conquer and competition. And I think it absolutely is possible. And I think that there are examples in history where people have lived in peace and harmony. Yes, they've had rules. Of course, we need a certain amount of decorum. But to what extent do we need that? To what extent do we honor our individual freedoms and know that we have to have a certain amount of rules to get along as a group?
Yeah, too many laws does get arduous. What were the cultures that were matriarchs that were?
Oh, I have that list somewhere. I don't have it right now. But there are a lot of different ones. I know one of them was some of the Mayans civilizations, and I don't know. I should look up that list again. But again, women. A lot of times, women are the glue in the family. They bring the peace and the harmony together, and it's perfect that the male is more the protector and provider. I think there's perhaps a sacredness and a perfection to those old role models. Not that they can't be challenging and different, not that they can't be flexible, but unity and home and hearth and the nurturing mother figure and the male who is the protector and the provider and perhaps the rule setter. I think it's all about the balance of making it work, finding a way.
I mean, I think about the animal world and matriarchies, and I think about spiders, where women eat the males, female eat the males. So I guess there's no argument because there's no one to argue with. And then I think, how's that transferred over into human societies? If you get rid of the male, what happens? And I think there's a certain part of American culture where you see the government take the place of the protector and provider. And then you have single moms, which certainly have a more difficult task, well, the same task to perform just by themselves.
Yes.
But then they have the government that's supposed to be taking care of them and doing all these things. And then I wonder how much that starts to teach people about
Dependency.
Getting something, dependency, getting something and being protected, and how much learned helplessness happens because of that, and that there is a balance. I'm not saying that you should have a male society that raises kids, because that would probably turn out terrible. I think about New Guinea, where they have the kids male children are taken from their moms when they're 8, and then they're raised with just men. And that is, from my American Christian standpoint, pretty horrific what goes on out there. Do your own research on that. But that's pretty, that's a great example of, you don't want men in charge of everything.
Well, and I think
balance.
Yes, and I think rites of passage are really important. A lot of our youth, they don't have that rite of passage where they consciously move from being, a child who is privileged to be taken care of, to being an active member of your tribe and society. How are you going to contribute to the tribe and society? And, when are you actually going to be considered, a woman or a man, not a child anymore? And I think that's one of the problems in our society, honestly. I think that's one of the things that other cultures do right, is they have a rite of passage. And so a lot of these males, it's beautiful for them because they grow up with, part of it is to serve and protect and to be a part of the tribe. And how am I supposed to do that? The same thing with the women, rather than just, thinking that they want to be some kind of a macho hero, or they want to, be a petulant child that is entitled to everything. I think rites of passage are very important. And I think that that's one of the things that's really lacking in our society with so many children that feel so entitled to everything.
Yeah, the ingratitude, I guess,
Ooh,
is probably one of the worst things that would mess a society up, or certainly have people look at other people differently if you're not grateful for things. That's one of those where if I feel a certain way about something, I try to back up and say, is it me? Am I the one that's not perceiving this right? Like, what have they got, or what do I have to be grateful for? And then, like, every time it rains or when it's cold outside, I always remember to think, wow, I'm glad I have a warm, dry place to be right now. And I guess you wouldn't know that if you've always had a warm, dry place to be. So you need to have
yes.
the wet and cold to understand the contrast between that.
I really agree. And that's why I think travel is really a great educational experience for kids. My kids, they always thought, kids, they always think they're poor to some degree or middle class because they always compare themselves to other kids. But man, once my kids went to Mexico and saw people living with dirt floors and went to other countries and saw what poverty really looks like, then it gave them something to compare it to. And again, I think we develop gratitude by being of service, first and foremost. Yes, the world is a beautiful place and we have so much to be grateful for. And when people do nice things for us, be grateful. When we do nice things for other people, be grateful. My grandma used to talk about that all the time, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. It's pretty basic. It's pretty important. And that really relates to gratitude, exactly what you're speaking of.
Yeah, the golden rule works if you have a sense of right and wrong.
Yep. And it helps develop a sense of right and wrong.
Yeah. If you don't, then you end up with some sort of pirate type code of, I'm gonna take whatever I want. And that's what I would want someone else to do for me. Is if I get weak, I don't want to be around. So the golden rule, I like it, but you have to understand the context of it for sure.
Absolutely.
Maybe
And that's
that's what's wrong with the world today is people don't have context of what they're saying. A lot of it's just repeating what they've heard and not what they experienced. So yeah, maybe people should travel a little.
I think it's really helpful. And I think my children gained a very broad perspective about how fortunate they really truly are by traveling and seeing other cultures.
Yeah, third world countries are third world countries, but you can find that kind of poverty here in America too, for sure.
Yep. And I never saw it when I was a kid. I didn't ever really see it growing up in Salt Lake City, Utah. I mean, everybody was, there were people that were richer, but everybody had a phone. Everybody had a house. I mean, we didn't have a lot of homeless people. We didn't have any homeless people. I mean, a few drunks that lived in the parks, and that was about it. I mean, but boy, how times are changing. And I think that compassion is important. And I think that self-compassion are important, but that's a whole nother topic of conversation.
All right. Any thoughts in closing then?
Just thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insights. And when we learn to honor other people, we learn to honor ourselves. And that really creates peace and harmony in my experience.
Thank you for your time. I'll talk to you on the other side of this musical exit here.
Thank you.